In the complex tapestry of African American history, Black surnames serve as a rich narrative of a little mystery and an enduring quest for Black identity. Stripped from our original connections through the brutalities of enslavement, Black folks often had these surnames of their enslavers forced upon them, and then only for us later to reject those names. This would serve as a silent witness to the enduring legacy of systemic racism and cultural evolution. So join us today while we delve into the history of the Black surname. And if you like stories like this, you can find more stories like this at onemichistory.com. And if you like audio only episodes, you can find One Mic wherever you find your podcast. But without further ado, let's get started. A surname, a family name or last name, is the hereditary portion of one's personal name that indicates one's family. It is typically combined with a given name to form the full name of an individual. Yet the history of surnames is a fascinating journey through time, illustrating how societies evolved to identify individuals. Originally, people were known only by their given name, but as population expanded, there was this need for additional identifiers, leading to the development of surnames that often reflected personal characteristics or geographic origins or occupations or family lineage. See, in China, the use of surnames dates back to 2000 BC with the Emperor Fuxi, who standardized them for census purposes. Initially maternal, these surnames would shift to a paternal system during the Shang Dynasty, and interestingly enough, Chinese tradition would have women retain their surnames even after marriage. In Western Europe, during the medieval period, family names were originally very rare, but during the Norman Conquest and the subsequent Doomsday Book of 1086 would spur the adoption of surnames among the English nobility, which would gradually spread across their society. And by the 14th century, surnames had become common in England and Scotland. Into the modern era, many cultures adopted family names for administrative purposes. Initially, during the European expansion in the 1600s, the Napoleonic Code would require people to have both a given name and a family name that would remain unchanged across generations. Notable adoptions include the Netherlands, Japan, and Turkey, who would all formalize surname usage. Yet names could also change to protect privacy or to escape persecution. For instance, European Jews anglicized their names in the United States to avoid prosecution, and conversely, governments can force name changes, as was done by Nazi Germany or in Bulgaria in the 1980s. Yet, story of surnames is an important part of the human cultural identity and shows a shared history, a shared heritage and lineage. However, the narrative for African Americans is distinct, mostly due to historical injustices stemming from displacement and enslavement. Before European colonization, African societies exhibited diverse naming traditions rooted in cultural, societal, and spiritual beliefs that varied across the continent. Unlike Western fixed surnames, many societies use surnames to convey lineage, historical narratives, or societal identity. For instance, the Asante people of Ghana use patronyms, clan names, or titles to denote social status or ancestral origins. The Yoruba people of Nigeria chose a children's name based on spiritual beliefs, birth order, or significant events at the time of their birth. Similarly, the Akan people of Ghana would employ surnames using prefixes and suffixes to indicate both parental and maternal ancestry. Yet, during the transatlantic slave trade, the forced displacement of millions of Africans had to endure brutal conditions, family separation, violence, and denial of basic human rights to satisfy economic demands for a plantation-based economy. Yet one of the first and most lasting dehumanizing acts was the imposition of European names on enslaved individuals, severing them from their ancestral heritage. So, upon arrival in the New World, enslaved Africans faced immediate erasure of their cultural identity, beginning with the stripping of their original names. European colonizers replaced these names with new ones like Fernando, Juan, or Maria, aiming to sever their connection from their homeland. Enslaved individuals are often assigned Anglo-European first names without a surname to reinforce their status as property rather than personhood. As time passed, naming conventions among the enslaved evolved, with many adopting the surnames of their enslaver, either by choice or by compulsion to assist in record keeping. Names common among the white population at the time were Johnson, Jackson, Smith, and Williams, and these names would also frequently appear among African Americans. Yet, black surnames could also be derived from local geographical features or plantation names, for example, fields or rivers. But it also could be a notable figure or a generalized name like Brown or Green, which would further detach them from their ancestry and emphasize their status as property. Despite this, some managed to retain or adapt African names like Cudjo or Bibba, or use different names altogether to help maintain these familial connections, personal identity, even within the constraints of enslavement. After gaining their freedom, some formerly enslaved individuals would adopt surnames like Freeman or Liberty to symbolize hope in a newfound identity. These acts reflected the continual efforts to reclaim their cultural ties and assert some humanity. The end of the Civil War and the subsequent Reconstructive era marked a pivotal point for African Americans as formerly enslaved individuals transitioned from enslavement to freedom. They faced the challenge of establishing new identities and asserting some autonomy, particularly in their naming practices. They sought to reclaim personal names and familial ties that had been denied to them during enslavement, striving to forge new connections to their heritage and establish some sense of self in a society that had long been denied to them. Many free individuals chose names that reflected their personal aspirations or honored personal heroes. You would see the formerly enslaved adopt surnames like Jefferson, Lincoln, or Douglas, while others would opt to retain the surnames of their former enslavers for practical reasons. Keeping these names often could offer some continuity and community recognition, providing them with some stability amidst social upheaval of the Reconstructive era. Conversely, others intentionally rejected these names in favor of ones with African origins or meanings in an attempt to preserve or celebrate their cultural heritage. The Civil Rights Movement would mark a transformational period in American history. It was a time to emphasize racial pride, cultural identity, and resist systemic oppression. During this time, African Americans began to alter their naming practices in such a way to reclaim their heritage and assert dignity. As a part of this shift, many distanced themselves from the surnames associated with their former enslavers and the legacy of enslavement. Notable figures like Malcolm X were at the forefront of this change. Born Malcolm Little, he rejected his slave name and adopted X to signify his unknown ancestry. Malcolm would articulate this point in questioning, "What is your name?" It could have been Smith or Jones. He would later highlight that the slave master who owned us put this last name on us to denote that we were his property, and how such surnames linked black individuals to their ancestors' oppressors and stripped away their real names during enslavement. All of this was part of a broader cultural movement that celebrated black history, art, and literature and aimed to counter negative stereotypes and reclaim our African heritage. With the rise of the Black Power movement, it fueled the adoption of more Afrocentric names and cultural statements to assert the pride of African heritage and reject the forced assimilation of Eurocentric norms. These names, often drawn on African languages or cultures, and symbolize the conscious effort to embrace African roots. For example, activist Stokely Carmichael would change his name to Kwame Ture after Ahmed Sekou Toure and Kwame Nkrumah, embodying this trend and demonstrating a commitment to Pan-Africanism and solidarity with the African diaspora. In recent years, Black surnames have become influenced by a variety of social, cultural, and political factors. Modern trends show increasing intentionality in selecting and modifying surnames, with many choosing to reflect their African heritage, their spirituality, and societal ideals. This often includes adopting African sounding surnames and creating new ones with a connection to African heritage or fostering community pride. Religious conversion has also led some to change their last name. Globalization has also facilitated a blending of naming practices with the African diaspora as people connect globally and display interests, traditions that transcend national boundaries. The internet and social media have enabled this cultural exchange, integrating these diverse linguistic and cultural elements into Black surnames and illustrating a dynamic interplay of this global community. Black surnames have always played a crucial role in the struggle for identity and recognition. Despite the enduring challenges imposed by colonial legacies and systemic racism, which influence perceptions and the treatment of Black surnames in society, they hold a significant cultural importance. Beyond labels, they symbolize perseverance and pride and carry stories of struggle and survival and triumph. And these names bridge the past and present and link generations and foster a sense of belonging. Today, the dynamic narrative of surnames continues to be as vital as our cultural heritage, representing an ongoing journey for self-identification and representation, and they adapt and thrive despite adversity, serving as an enduring element of our cultural identity. And understanding and celebrating this evolution of Black surnames honors the resistance of Black communities and reaffirms their rightful place in the overall global heritage. Thank you. This has been One Mic Black History. I'm your host, Country Boy. If you like stories like this, you can find more stories like this at onemichistory.com. And if you like One Mic History audio only episodes, you can find my podcast wherever you get your podcasts. I'd like to thank all my financial contributors. Without you, none of this could be possible. And I love you all. Peace.